Is NIO still on track for a share price of around 20 USD by the end of the year? You may know in a previous video I outlined that this might be the potential. So as a wrap up of this week, I want to give you a couple of updates. So talking about a couple of macroeconomic factors, about some charts. And meanwhile, an update from my side. I'm now back in Germany here. I made the trip back with the ET5, around 800 kilometers, and if I get the time, I'll make a video about that over the weekend. Another weekend video that will be shared with my patrons is about my experience with the NIO ET5 Touring, which I enjoyed a little test ride in Munich, and I'll share a couple of new insights there, which I'm doing as a behind the scenes there in this regard. So feel free to join the Patreon if you want. This supports the channel and also gets you exclusives like that from time to time. Now let me get into my Excel sheet here again, which I used also in my last video about pointing out different scenarios. And again, this is making you think in possibilities and scenarios. It doesn't mean that this scenario is going to happen. However, what's interesting here, and I've now added the scenario 11, which is NIO grows around 40% year over year, has lower average sales prices, but the multiple is going up and deliveries target at 170,000. That's a new scenario that I'm now saying more and more likely to happen. So one important news here is if we look a little bit at the deliveries, the weeklies, I'm not a big fan of going through them each and every day, but we can clearly see that the second week of the September here is actually higher than it was historically in the second week. Yes, it's always a little bit of a dip, but why I don't like those weeklies is because there can simply be too many variables why this is changing too much every week. However, if the trend is up, which it is for now, that it's showing us that at least the fundamentals are pointing into the right direction. And in this direction, I think it would support that we are on track for 170,000 deliveries for this year, and that filling up those variables here for the sales prices, revenues, and so on would give us a price target of around 20 USD. Now, what would need to happen, of course, which is included in that scenario, is a multiple expansion to around 4, which is currently not the case, although we see that a multiple has been crawling up slightly, but recently has also been retracting a little bit. So what we can say is on the fundamental side, it seems that NIO is in the right shape for now in terms of deliveries growing, being consistent, and the trend is up. However, what we don't have currently to reach this scenario is the expansion in the multiples, right? Therefore, let me look at a couple of charts which show us that the macros are really not favorable for NIO in this regard currently. So what you see here is the QQQ, so American tech companies compared to CQQQ, so that is the Chinese indices for tech names, and you will see that the QQQ has outperformed the China side dramatically and is at an all-time high here in this regard at this chart, and has not reversed at all. It's keeping on going up, so meaning the US is outperforming China substantially. Whether or not we will ever see a reversal back to the 5.5 on this chart, who knows, but certainly it has worked against Chinese names, obviously. Similarly, if we compare KWEB to ARK Invest, we can see that KWEB has not started to outperform those risky names by ARK Invest currently. So that means even Cathie Wood's basket is currently outperforming a little bit relatively the big China tech names. Now, what I keep on mentioning here on the channel as an important metric to watch is the US dollar basket, and that one keeps grinding higher and higher and higher, although we see here on the RSI it's technically at very overbought levels, but it just keeps on going. One could even say it's still in a little bit of a short-term uptrend here because it failed to go down and could potentially even go over those previous highs that we've seen. So this US dollar strength usually is bad for emerging markets, and with that with China and risk investments in general. The same picture still in US interest rates, so they just don't want to top out, whether or not it's the short term or the long term rates. They keep on grinding up here almost in an uptrend. Next week we'll have the Fed decision on Wednesday, I believe, so that will be an important indicator whether or not the Fed keeps on rising rates, and that should reflect ultimately in a big way in terms of the US yields here that you see, and also the US dollar chart. And so with that, we see not only pressure on the Chinese names, but also look here, some of the ARK Invest names. Teladoc is down 92%, recently again at all-time lows. Another ARK Invest name that I actually like, which is Unity Software, also not looking pretty here. As you can see, this is affecting still most of the risk assets in general and not only Chinese stocks. And if we're looking at the NIO chart, it's actually not too bad, to be honest. It's still keeping above this downtrend line that it has broken, and it keeps on consolidating. And if we're looking a little bit closer here, it seems that it's just in a waiting position here and can't decide, possibly up till the Fed decision, whether or not it wants to continue its way up, or whether there might be even more pressure on these risk assets in general because of economic macro factors. But I would say all of these charts, like the outperformance of the US names, the US dollar strength, as well as the US government bond yields, they are at really high levels, and the probabilities are just more skewed towards them rolling over and actually betting on the opposite trend. And in my personal opinion, that's not financial advice, but I think the fact that these macro indicators are at such elevated levels and seemingly close to be rolling over would tell me that actually the safer bet here is to expect a reversal in some of these risk asset names, including NIO, including Chinese stocks, but maybe even some of the ARK Invest names in the coming weeks and months. Like if you're watching on a 3 months chart out there, I think that might be the rather likelihood scenario there. And therefore, to sum things up, I would say it's not out of this world and unlikely that NIO could get this macroeconomics tailwind and a multiple expansion while the fundamentals hopefully stay intact, and that could realistically give a fair valuation of 20 USD in my point of view. But please keep in mind that this is very risky. Should NIO show weakness in some of these metrics here, like the weeklies and so on, that might reverse the fundamental strength here, and that could also, of course, result in a multiple that will be depressed and continue trading like this. So keep that in mind. Always think of probabilities and scenarios and adjust your risk management accordingly. Just in my point of view, I think we are on track, and it's more likely that we are heading towards 20 by the end of the year than the other way around. However, I could be wrong on that. Just giving you my opinion here. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend and see you in my next videos.